me. I'd like to begin by thanking my colleague Rona Mackay for bringing this very important motion to the Chamber, and also to pay tribute and thanks to my SNP party colleague Stuart MacDonald for his vigorous pursuit of this issue and for introducing his Members' Bill. I think it's a bill that all MPs in Scotland, indeed across the UK, should get behind, and as Ross Greer rightly highlighted, regardless of where you are on the political spectrum. I should at this point, before I proceed, declare an interest as a member of the Musicians' Union and as a former musician. I don't know if you ever can be a former musician, but because where music leads, the rest of the economy tends to follow. I don't think there's any working musician is not familiar with being asked to work for free, and indeed it's often seen as the only path to success is often seen through working for no pay. Indeed, the Musicians' Union in 2015, and survey of their members, 60% of their members, that's 30,000 members, had reported that they had worked for free. Interestingly, there was research in 2016 by the Association of Independent Professionals and Self-Employed and the Freelancer Club, and it suggested that 20% of respondents actually identified working for free as standard practice in the industry. And the reason that I highlight this is because it has become the cultural norm. It has become culturally accepted. If a young musician of a young band starting off are subject to an unscrupulous promoter or agent who encourages them to go and work perform in certain venues, take on certain gigs with the promise of more work down the line, we're likely to accept. But very often it can be the case that the work doesn't materialise or the promised rates don't materialise. And this is something that musicians have been familiar with for quite some time. And I want to sort of pay tribute to the Musicians' Union for their Work Not Play campaign, which has been highlighting this issue for some time. I think there's probably another couple of points that I wish to actually highlight before moving on from the survey I just mentioned, the Independent Professionals and Self-Employed survey and the Freelancer Club, because I think there's some interesting data on those people who are working unpaid. It suggests that a majority of the respondents to the survey, 44%, fit into the 16 to 29 age bracket. And shockingly as well, though, many of those freelancers had up to 7 years' experience in their trade. So it's not just young, inexperienced people, it's people who actually have real skills and real experience in that area are still working and not being paid. And this is very telling. A large, quite significant proportion, 67%, were women. And so I think when we actually look at the groups who are being affected, we know the challenges we face within a more equal economy with addressing the gender pay gap. And given that we are celebrating young people this year, there's no more appropriate year to be seeking to end trial shifts. So one of the points I would make to Dean Lockhart, who suggested that perhaps for a limited period, unpaid trial shifts may have merit. I say this is how it started to an extent in music, and you then develop a culture which becomes expanded and it becomes the norm. We end up with 20% of people working. Certainly.
Quickly, Dean Lockhart.
A very quick question. Would the member suggest that we ban all trial shifts on that basis?
Tom Arthur.
I think what there's an option for is a probationary period. And I think that's perfectly legitimate. People can have a probationary period where they are paid a wage as anyone else would be. And at the end of that probationary period, if we don't meet the requisite requirements, then action can be taken. So I think visa laws already exist. I think people who work should be paid. Just the final point I would want to make is this speaks to the broader fair work agenda. And one of the other terms that's been kind of imported from the world of music into the general economy is that of the gig economy, which is just a fancy way of saying insecure work, low-paid work, precarious work. I think the challenges that we face going forward as an economy with the rise of automation, the hollowing out of middle-income jobs and middle-scale jobs, is that now is a time to actually be strengthening workers' rights, because if we don't do it, we're going to face a future where more and more people are going to be in a position that far too many musicians have found themselves in, which is that of insecure work and all the stress that comes with that. Thank you.